Welcome to Job Ready. Today we're joined by Dave McCool, CEO of Muzzy Lane, who spent years working on a problem that sits right at the center of the durable skills conversation. How do you actually know if someone has a durable skill versus just being told they do? Dave's worked with major publishers, with Education Design Lab, and on Gates Foundation funded research into how universities and employers each try to validate skills like critical thinking and collaboration. And what he's found is, in my opinion, a really messy situation. So today we're going to dig into that situation and what it would actually take to fix it. Dave, welcome to the show. Pardon my informal description of the situation. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, I really appreciate being here. We, really enjoy your show and looking forward to today.
Thanks, Dave. Well, let's dive right in. Let's start with the problem. In the category of durable skills, I know when you and I met, you talked about how university credentials get handed out to many without ever actually evaluating the student in terms of durable skills. So can you walk us through how that happens and why it's so common?
Yeah, I think it's something that's happening more in the last 5 to 10 years. We've been doing this for about 2 decades now, but really in the last 5 to 10 years as the skills-based economy and skills-based learning and hiring have kind of become more front and center. It's put a lot more focus on this in universities. And I think what's happening is the situation is messy. There's over 1 million credentials in the credential engine database. So universities want to start, they believe they are giving their learner these skills. They believe that when you take that intro biz course in university, you're getting critical thinking, you're getting those skills. They want to give you some credit for that. And so I understand the motivation, but often they're just inferred because they don't have a good test. They don't have a good definition. So they say, look, the syllabus says you're going to learn critical thinking in this course. If you pass this course, in addition to credit towards your degree, we're going to give you a micro credential that says, hey, Jeff, you've got critical thinking skills.
And employers are accepting that, or are they I hear from employers a lot, Dave.
Hey, Jeff, real quick, because I think I've heard this very often. I've heard durable skills, I've heard soft skills, I've heard power skills. I just want to make sure that we're talking about one and the same, where there's a nuance difference. I think your question is excellent, by the way, Jeff. I just want to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what durable skills are.
Yeah, and human skills, you could add to that and a few other ones as well. I think that, the soft skills term actually came from some IBM work, 10 or 20 years ago, contrasting them from hard skills. EDL really focused on durable skills, Education Design Lab, when we started working with them around 2020. And then America Succeeds came out with a framework a couple of years ago where they kind of stamped durable skills down. So that's really become, I think, the most commonly used term in the space, which I think is an improvement from soft skills. But yeah, I agree with you that it's not. Not everyone's talking the same language always.
Well, I mean, let's draft off that. So as I've heard it, the former chief learning officer at McDonald's basically said there isn't really an authority telling employers which durable skills credentials are meaningful or mean anything. Is that still true today? And what's it costing employers when it is?
It is still true today. And there are little pockets where it's not true. And I think what I experienced working directly with employers and universities is there's sort of some countervailing forces at work, because the way people are combating that lack of a global authority is they're saying, look, let's work locally. Let's work with employers in a given region, say in Arkansas, the Arkansas Community College system. Let's get together and define what are the skills needed here in this region. The colleges will teach those skills, credential those skills as they define them with their local employer set, and move students from learning to work. And that works in those pockets. The problem is it doesn't transfer. So as soon as I leave that part of the country and I go to Oregon, they don't know what these skills are. They don't know what these credentials are. Like, it doesn't mean anything to them. It might be the actual same skill they need, but it's not described in a way that they can connect that to their need.
Hey, David, I need to help you unpack that a little bit. So let me ask you this. Is critical thinking skill a durable skill?
Critical thinking is a durable skill by all. I would say EDL, America Succeeds, and NACE are the 3 biggest frameworks I know. They all include critical thinking as a durable skill. There are differences about levels and context, but they all would agree with that critical thinking is a durable skill.
So when you talk about region specific or industry specific, the critical skill framework is probably consistent across, but the job specific or industry specific requires you to zig when you're supposed to zag or something along that line. So I'm just
Charlie,
trying to.
What do you mean by zig instead of zag?
So, for example, let's just say that in the Midwest, advanced manufacturing, critical thinking skill in that particular vertical may mean you turn left, while healthcare industry in South Florida may frame critical thinking skill as you turn right here. That's sort of what I'm thinking in terms of zigzag. And that's, I think, is the gap that I'm trying to reconcile why there is a difference. And maybe that's not what you're insinuating, David, but I'm trying to reconcile that.
I think that's a good example. I often use critical thinking is a tough one because critical thinking is a weird durable skill in that kind of everything is critical thinking. I think that tends to get bucketed sometimes. Let's use oral communication, though, which is another one of the durable skills in the Education Design Lab framework. Oral communication for a medical assistant working in a hospital situation with patients is a very different skill set from oral communication for a software engineer who, say, is doing code reviews with their peers. So from an industry standpoint, people believe those are different skills. So if I've proven I have oral communication skills and I'm credentialed for that, they want to know in what context, in what environment. And they don't necessarily believe it's going to travel. Just because you're good at doing software code reviews with your peers, you're going to be good at talking to patients in a hospital about difficult medical decisions.
Wow. So industry by industry, durable skills can differ in their definition on the university side before people go out into the world. But overall, for the systems that are measuring this, and Charlie, when you jumped in there, I was gonna explain something. So in terms of the employers, we talk to a lot of employers here, and a lot of employers have admitted, on a skills first basis, we're excited about the data. We're excited about being able to measure things and being more specific, but we don't really have our act down yet, right? And I've heard that from a lot of employers. Is like there's a consciousness, but like knowing exactly what to do with the data, a lot of folks don't really know what to do with that data yet. Is this on the employer side? Is there a uniform definition that's been accepted of these durable skills? Or is it different model by model? Like, is Education Design Lab different from some other model? Or what do you see?
It's, I would say no to your first question. There's not a universal standard that's been adopted. I think what I saw being in this space, having been in the space for a while now, large employers like, say, IBM, Walmart, AWS, have all developed their own internal taxonomies and their own internal programs for measuring advancement, hiring decisions, those kinds of things. The small to mid-sized employers was where we struggled the most because they don't have the scale to do a program like that internally, but they also don't have clarity in the market on how to deal with all the credentials and all the frameworks that are out there. So I think it's getting better. It's been kind of frustrating because there's also just enabling technology problems that even before you even get to, should I accept this or not? Does my HR tech or my applicant tracking system actually even pass these credentials through to my hiring process, or do they drop them along the way? Northeastern did a bunch of research a few years ago, identified that as one of the major gaps. Do I have an LER, learning employment record, or a CLR, a comprehensive learner record, or a wallet or a badge system where I can even get access to what you, Jeff, have as credentials in the durable skills space? So the industry over the last 5 years has been very focused on solving those technical infrastructure problems and interoperability problems. One university can issue you a credential, you can put it into some kind of wallet or learner record, and then that can travel to all the places it needs to go when you, say, apply for a job or, say, apply for a graduate degree or just want to join a nonprofit who wants to know what your skill set is. So I think we're kind of coming out the back end of that now. And then the question is, okay, now who's going to tell us which of these have value? Go to the McDonald CLO example again. Who's going to tell us which of these have value to me as an employer?
It's so fascinating that you mentioned that, Debbie, because I often bucketize durable skills and soft skills, whatever, into sort of one bucket. And even if you narrow down to, say, critical thinking skill, I think of it in a simplistic term possible. But the example that you point out in terms of oral communication for a software engineer, where you need to communicate certain way with precision, with technical, specificity included in there versus a nurse assistant in a hospital setting the oral communication may be more sympathetic, maybe more soft, more caring, more passionate, right? So the batch of communication batch or skill differs greatly in those two scenarios. And I didn't actually think about that before, come to that realization before, but we've seen universities issuing various badges. So for example, critical thinking badge or communication badge. So how do you reconcile what universities are, well, and I think each one of them have their own sort of definition as well. When they're issuing those badges and how things are so different by industry, if you dial deeper, industry by industry on the employer side.
So I guess it's a good moment for me to say there's two pieces to the value equation here when you think about durable skills credentials, sub-degree credentials, however we define them. There's the value to the employer directly. How are they using that as a signal of skill and hiring and advancement? And there's value to the learner themselves. And there is research and there are studies out there. I believe EDL did one with the University of Melbourne and University of Dayton, where they studied the value to the learner of earning these credentials separate from what the employer valued. So what they found was that 76% of the earners of these credentials actually did better in their job searches. And I mean, EDL is very much about advancing of employment, especially for non-degree holders. So they were able to advance their job prospects simply by virtue of having earned the credentials, learning the vocabulary, learning what skills they had, learning how to talk about the skills they had and how they would apply to an employer's needs. So that's important. And that is a very clear benefit that we're seeing today from people who earn these credentials, separate from the employers valuing it as a hiring signal.
So Dave, if inferred credentials don't work, if there's a lot of volatility, what does work? What does an assessment like you guys create have to actually do to convince an employer that someone has a real skill?
I think they need to have someone that they trust saying that it works, or they have to have enough experience with it themselves. And again, that requires a large scale employer. So if we think about small to medium sized businesses, which employ most of the people in the United States, I think they need someone to trust. I'll give you another example. Higher Learning Commission, one of the major accreditors for university for degree programs, did a project a few years back called the Credential Lab. I was on the team. They basically launched a parallel program to, not using the word credit because that's a different thing, but to endorse non-degree credential providers. So the whole idea was to say, look, here's a non-degree credential provider, Mezzi Education Design Lab. We will review them the way we would review a university for accreditation. We will look at their procedures, we will look at their testing, we will look at their various learner-centric pieces, employer-centric pieces, and we'll bless them and say, these credentials have meaningful value based on the way that this organization has developed and delivered them. And I think that's a first step. That's the kind of thing we need, because as long as it's all sort of self-sovereign, self-identified, you're just not. I just don't think most employers are going to know how much value to put in them, and therefore it probably will. I've always been a big believer in, when I'm making a decision and I have some really crisp info and some really fuzzy info, I tend to gravitate to the crisp info. I think most people are like that, and I think as long as these non-degree credentials stay fuzzy, they they'll get devalued.
And it gets even fuzzier if you think about, because we use the term employers were like catch all for all the roles, right? So you got the learning roles in the organization. You got the HR roles and you got the hiring manager roles for different departments. And I would venture to say that most of us outside of HR probably don't have a definitive definition when it comes to those durable skills. And how do you accommodate for personal nuances?
It's a tough question. I think the system has to ingest them and know how to value them. I think we're transitioning right now from, I don't know, I grew up during the everyone should go to college era, right? Like that's the obvious, like college, people go to college, do better than people who don't. The obvious answer to that is everyone goes to college. And I think that worked for a lot of people. I think that was a great thing for a lot of people. I think it didn't work for everyone. We probably all know people who went partway through, didn't make it, have a lot of debt, ended up probably worse off than when they started. I think it's 40.4 million was the last number I saw of the some college, no degree population in the US. And then I think we've also kind of come post that era where it is just not financially and logistically possible now for everyone to go to college. The prices have soared so high. You think about a multi-$100,000 4-year degree for someone who's maybe in their 30s or 40s, who's been working gig work, who doesn't have a big savings behind them, doesn't have a parent anymore to pay for them. So I think we need a solution for them. And yet the degree premium is still real. So I think that's a sticky problem to solve. And I think things like Workforce Pell, I know you talked to Kevin about that, and other programs to try to bolster the credentials of the non-degreed population are really important to make that happen.
I'm going to dive into a little bit further, because I think the degree has been, to your point. And by the way, David, don't get Jeff and I started on the student debt and the cost of tuition, because that's why we found
we'll go on all day.
Yeah, that's true. So essentially, regardless if you're in HR or learning organization or frontline manager or department head, the degree has been the de facto universal certification that
Yeah. It's the proxy for skill.
correct. And so is that correct in my framing, or my understanding is that somehow now we're trying to figure out how to swap out or how to augment degree from durable skills certifications, or both?
Yeah, I think that's been what people are trying to figure out in the system. And my opinion on this is that the degree is going to still have value. It's going to still show that you went through a certain amount of stuff. I think the proliferation of online degrees has widened the definition of a degree, so it's not as obvious. Like, just because I have a degree, you might want to know a little more before you actually know how you want to what weight you want to put on that. We need to elevate the non-degree credentials to the point where they have enough value that they do carry hiring signal weight. I think the best, and this is from an equity standpoint, this is going to be tricky because EDL is big on equity, but I do think the best is still going to be the degree plus the durable skills credentials. That's still going to be the strongest signal. And as long as there's a population that can't the degree is unattainable for, that's going to work against equity. But I suspect that's our near-term future. Non-degree credentials get elevated to the point where they start carrying real weight in hiring decisions. The degree still carries the weight it carries, and the people who will do best are the ones who probably have both.
Dave, is there a way for it, since you brought up the equity question, is anybody working on a way for those who don't have access to a university degree or education to assess their skills and carry them around? I know there's a lot of great work going on with U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation in terms of their T3 network.
Yeah.
But I haven't dug into this question before. How does that work? What's that look like?
They have a couple of programs. I don't think they have a broad program for letting you as an individual assess and certify your skills and get credentialed. There is a project called X Credit. I don't know if you've heard of that. Funded by the Walmart Foundation, run by Education Design Lab, a consortium of, I think it was 14 companies by it was all done. But it was a great project. They built an entire ecosystem from an LMS all the way out to assessments and credentialing providers, and it was free. Foundation funded, free to learners, very focused initially on the transitioning military cohort, and then expanding into gig workers. Anyone you wanted could go on that platform, I believe they still can today, say, I believe my Signal Corps experience in the Army gave me communication, creative problem solving, and empathy skills. You could test your skills and you could get micro-credentials issued for those skills that you could then take with you and go off. So I think that's the closest I've seen to that. But that could be a role for government in this ecosystem.
And where does that tend to land? Is it DOE? Is it more on the workforce side? I mean, like, what's the current temperature of the water there?
That's a really good question. I've seen more activity, both federal and state, from the Department of Labor side than the Department of Ed side. Federally, Department of Ed is more focused K-12 than higher ed already to begin with. And I think the workforce stuff has tended to come out of the labor side of things. Certainly here in Massachusetts, that's true. We have a thing called Mass Skills Coalition. But yeah, I think that could be a role that they could play. But I think that, it brings up this question of equity would say, hey, equity is better served if the hiring signal from the degree lessened while the hiring signal from non-degree credentials increased. But I don't know that that's overall the best outcome for everybody.
Right. Well, so speaking of foundations getting involved, I know you did some really interesting research with Gates Foundation. Can you tell us about the research you did with Gates and what you set out to learn and what surprised you?
Yeah, awesome. We love that. It was foundational for us
too.
Halfway through our 2 decades of work in this space. So it was a great checkpoint for us. We spent a whole year doing it. And really the thesis was, remember, we're sort of pre-AI and we're pre-durable skills credentials at this point. But we're still, like, online education has really taken off. It's 2014, 2015. You've got a dramatic population, especially non-traditional students, taking online education. And Gates was like, we're trying to use more active learning techniques like game and simulation-based learning to make this online learning more effective. But nothing we're investing in is having an impact. Like, no one's using it. And so why aren't they using these things? So the research question was, what would need to happen for these techniques, game-based learning and simulation, to have an impact on learners' outcomes in online higher education for non-traditional students as the focus? So very focused. So we talked to administrators, faculty, students. We did focus groups. We did surveys. We did lit review. There's a 40-page report still on our website. And it was very, very eye-opening. High awareness of these techniques among those populations. Instructors and administrators at Western Governors, for example, SNHU, these were the kind of companies or schools that were in the research. They knew all about these things. And they said, most of what people make, we can't use. And we said, well, why not? And the answer was, people make things that are too big. They don't fit our course. Don't disrupt my course was the mantra we kept hearing. We can't control them. We can't control the content. You're giving us these boat anchors to stick into our course, and you're telling us how great they are. They don't have any accessibility, which is an absolute requirement for higher ed. WCAG 2.0, now 2.2 AA. They don't integrate to our LMS. They don't run in natively on all of our students' devices. So a whole litany of things. So for us, that was the call to change. And we just shifted and said, okay, here's the blueprint for what the market's asking for. And so Muzzy Lane Author, which is what came out at the end of the research, was really that was our answer to that.
So can you walk us through how, Muzzy Lane Author, which is kind of the solution that you worked on with Education Design Lab, right?
They came in a few years after the first iteration of the platform came out, but they were very much we weren't doing much with durable skills until Education Design Lab came into the picture in 2019.
Well, maybe you could walk us through kind of like how Muzzy Lane started and what Education Design Lab did. Like, our audience is really interested in solutions and how this was built and what's an authentic, scalable assessment that works for the universities look like in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2014-15, our mission was, look, we've done a lot of custom work in this space for individual partners. What's a scalable solution that people could just adopt and use by themselves? How do we stop being a custom content developer and more of a tools provider that enable you, an instructional designer, say at Western Governors University, to go solve your problems that you had? And so that was the mission. So the platform came out. It's a SaaS platform. You create accounts. No coding required was the big innovation at the time, because what we heard from instructional designers and subject matter experts was, look, we want to build this stuff, but right now you need an engineer to build a simulation or a game-based learning product, and we're not engineers, and we don't have money to pay engineers. So making those tools very plug and play, very WYSIWYG, kind of like a website builder, like a Wix or a Squarespace, but for learning assessments. And then it was just off to the races. They could just build what they wanted. We set up sort of templates for various forms of assessment that had been successful for us in the custom days. Role play assessment being a great example of that. You play a role, you interact with virtual colleagues, you analyze data and information, you make decisions, and you're trying to solve problems. So, and can you successfully, 4 P's of marketing? Can you be a marketer who's introducing a product into a market and figure out your pricing, your feature set, your segmentation, and succeed or fail? So that was the mission. And that's what we just started doing in 2015. It's grown every year. We did 1.5 million students last year across all of our higher ed partners. And then in 2019, EDL came to us and said, hey, this is a really cool approach. We got a problem. We have a whole durable skills curriculum for 9 durable skills, but all the assessments are manual. And so think about this. I'm giving a critical thinking curriculum to a community college instructor with 100 students. And at the end of the curriculum, they have to deliver a battery of 4 assessments manually administered and graded to all 100 students. They said, that's a pain point for us. They don't have time. They don't necessarily feel like they have the expertise. Could we use role play simulation to put learners into these situations and auto assess these skills for them? So we spent a year doing critical thinking first. We built it out, tested it, iterated, tested it. They said, yep, this seems to work. Our customers are saying, yeah, this works. This helps us. I mean, we built a battery of 72 durable skills for their entire framework on the platform, which are still available today to all of their customers as an option for assessment.
Hey, David,
go ahead, Charlie.
No, I was going to take it a completely different direction. So if you still have a question for David, go ahead.
Okay. And I might be prescient about the direction you were going to take it in. All of this sounds data heavy. And it sounds like a lot of the friction was due to the heavy lift on the part of the folks who were supposed to assess, be in an assessment position, the real instructors in the classroom, right? The universities have to stand behind it. So AI comes around and starts making that lift a little bit easier, I would imagine. But I don't know. I want to take the bonehead approach with you because you've been on the front lines. How has AI affected all this?
It has been the second major inflection point for us. It's been as big, if not bigger, than the no coding required initial inflection point. And it every day you wonder, how much is it obsoleting or how much is it changing? And I think usually on the ground, especially in education, it ends up being a little less than you might think. But what we found is that AI has taken an existing assessment problem. Like I would argue for the last 10 years, we've mostly assessed knowledge, not skill, even though we would have liked to be assessing skill. But online assessments are often very multiple choice-ish oriented. There are a lot of context. There's not a lot of project-based assessment because it's expensive to deliver and assess. That's what AI changed. AI has made that possible. And so everyone is scrambling saying, what's the right model across the spectrum of how to use AI in that space, right? So you could use AI to, some are doing this, like the AI chatbot could just be your assessor and run you through a battery of tests and go, yep, Jeff has these skills. All the way the other end of AI could just help build a structured assessment that looks like what we had before, but more cheaply and easily. So we're looking for this space. We think this current sweet spot's in the middle of that somewhere, where we're using it. You want to use AI to build a really customized assessment to what you need for your university and your learner. You want to build some more authentic learner interactions into that. So you want that learner to be answering in their own voice and making decisions of their own, not just always picking choices. But you still want some structure around that. You still have some goals. You have a cohort of students all trying to meet. I need to know, do Jeff, Dave, and Charlie know how to, ask clarifying questions as part of an oral communication assessment? I still need to know that about all three of us. So I don't want the three of us to have completely different experiences with chatbots. I want some structure, but some extra variability within that structure. That's kind of where we see it.
And
What
yeah,
about
Jeff, you did take
Yeah.
my questions on that, but I want to go further with you on this, Dave, because I think you opened up a whole can of worm. And as I'm sitting here thinking, because I think the topic of AI has been probably one of the most controversial, kind of debate going on right now between everyone's involved, employer, school, and even from a student's perspective in all different range of topics. But what if AI as a durable skill? Because, for example, right, I mean, my daughter and I, we've had a number of discussions around this, and she's like, well, I really don't like to use AI because I don't want to get lazy. I don't want to get in the habit of AI is doing all the thinking for me. As opposed to, I say, well, that's legitimate. And that is a big concern, but you have to see AI as a tool that maybe the smartest assistant that you can find that can challenge your thinking, right? That can enable you to think differently, to see differently, because you're biased in your own view. And so when it comes to leveraging AI as a durable skill, because I think a lot of employees are asking for it, but they don't quite know what to ask for with regards to AI fluent or AI competent, or so if you can frame it a little bit for us in terms of where do you see that's going and how that can potentially be not as a replacement of one's ability to be creative, to think, to ask questions, to challenge, but a kind of a 100x rocket booster that you can strap on to our grad, to our student in the workforce.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts in response to that. I think I'd start with something that struck us early on, was that the incentive structure around AI and learning and AI and work are very different. I'm an employer, right? So if you work for me and you can use AI to get something done super fast and move to the next thing, that's good. I check it off the box. If you're like, no, I'm doing productive struggle and it's going to take me all week to solve this one problem, but it's going to be better for my cognitive health. I'm like, is that really what the employer wants? Whereas in school, it's the complete opposite. You that would be bad in schools for AI to do all your work for you, cognitively offload everything for you. So I think we saw that quickly right away. I think that for us, our philosophy on the learning side was, where can AI make learners think harder, think more, not less? So I think just a perfect example was, a lot of people use multiple choice questions in our role play scenarios because it's a way to get at whether they understand the context of the situation they're in. But that's selected response. So that is easier. You've all taken the SAT, so I'm sure, people look at them and they go, okay, I can eliminate that one because that one doesn't seem right. That one seems to, process of elimination. So maybe you're not learning as much as you want. AI lets you then replace that with an open response question. So that same question, Jeff, we're starting this, we're going to start a company to restore antique light fixtures. What kind of business should we be? Should we be a corporation, a partnership, or a sole proprietorship? Now, you should know that liability is probably going to be a big issue for you, so it should be a corporation because they have best liability shields. And in a multiple choice, you'd have those three. But with an open response, it can just be, what should we do, Jeff? Tell me what we should do and why. And you just speak in your own, hey, I think we should be a corporation because, our tax status will be better and blah, 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 blah. And the AI can say, hey, well, that's sort of right. Well, I'll give you half credit because you picked the right form, but you picked the wrong reason. So that elevates learners. So we're always trying to look for ways, how can AI make proven educational solutions more effective? We don't want to be the ones who are experimenting with a new AI model for education, which, I respect that. Lots of startups out there are experimenting with new AI models for education. I don't think we know if many of them, if they work or not.
What do you see as the interaction between, there's a lot of different words for it, but there's certainly a lot of buzz about the impact of AI in the way that Charlie's daughter ascribed to it, which is, hey, if I'm offloading thinking, my critical thinking, these other durable skills are decreasing. I mean, have you guys seen any impact to durable skills assessments since the advent of, a broad adoption of AI, let's say beginning of 2025?
That's a good question. I have not personally looked at that data. EDL probably has access to that data. We're kind of behind them, but I'd be curious to ask them that question.
Yeah.
They might have a good answer to that. But I think
reach out to Kevin.
Yeah, reach out to Kevin, yes, for the follow-up.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. There's no easy answer. I mean, you see a lot of products come out of education which are Socratic in nature, and it's an AI tutor that won't give you the answer. But I mean, the learner can just turn to the next tab on their browser to ChatGPT and just get the answer. So I don't know that that's a way you're going to be able to solve that problem. I think, I don't know if you saw the Titan Partners Time for Class latest report that just came out. So according to their survey of 750 universities, so half are redesigning their assessments because of AI. That's a big deal. I don't think that's been true in our lifetime, that half of universities at the same time are redesigning their assessment models. But what I thought was really interesting is half of them are redesigning with AI built into them, kind of what we've been talking about. And half are going back to Blue Books and proctored offline exams. So talk about a complete, they call them the integrators versus the defenders. So I think we're in real time in a big experiment on where assessment's going to end up.
I'm curious in your thinking here, David, because let's go back to the point you said you were as an employer, and you certainly want an employee to leverage AI to get work done much quicker, right?
Right.
But I also have seen this a number of times when whoever it is just instead of leveraging AI as the most powerful tool to help them think through more thoroughly, more comprehensively, deeper, they just give a lazy prompt and wholesale adoption, if you will, of whatever it spits out from that. So as an employee, obviously that's not what you want, because it's like, I didn't just hire you to write that quick prompt, right? I mean, and that literally was my instruction to you. Because you expect a certain level of critical thinking skill, certain level or skillfully translating the experience that one individual has with whatever the job is to initiate AI in a way that can produce much better result, not just faster, but much, much better result than if just one individual sitting in a cubicle with limited knowledge can do. And to me, that is a skill, because I think in some way, and I'll take a step back and before I get off my soapbox here, because I think for a lot of us have a lot of years in the workplace, we have a lot of experience. But obviously, I'm not an engineer, so I can't code and things like that. But now AI has removed that friction. So I'm able to translate my decades of experience, vision into something that I can touch and play very quickly. So I see AI as like 100x enabler. But I think you're not going to get the better result out of your employee unless your employee has the ability to harness AI's power to get not just work done faster, but 10x better, and allow you to gain the competitiveness. And so come back to the question of, is that a durable skill? And what does that look like from the employer? And then how do you kind of walk that back over to the higher ed?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying I am an engineer by background, and I often think how different my life would be if I was coming into the job market today versus when I did. I think I'd be more of a product manager and less of a coder. But I think you're right. I think AI literacy should be a durable skill. I've not seen any of the frameworks call it that yet. I think if we start from that employer back, like your example of the person, the lazy prompter who just kind of offloads all their work in poorly, hopefully the employer is evaluating the quality of their work and saying you're not a very good employee. Small companies, we know that's not always as strict as it should be. But I think the people who are successful are going to be people who learn how to use AI effectively. That's a moving target. The rules we had a year ago aren't the same as the rules today. So I think it's a durable skill in the sense that you want to understand how to interact with it, how to evaluate what you're getting back, and how to adjust to that. You don't want to just learn, oh, it can't add numbers and it's bad at this, because that will change a year from now. So I think that employers are going to need employees who are really good at collaborating with AI on getting work done. And we use Cowork a ton at Muzzy Lane. Everyone's on that now. But, as to your example, you can't be late. If you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to get the results that your employer is looking for. And so you're not going to get very high job satisfaction. And I think that starts all the way back it should start all the way back in your education, and you should be learning the techniques of how this works and how to understand it and get better at using it.
We've all had the experience of slop, and it's frustrating because the slop takes up your time, takes more time than it would have for somebody to generate something that was worthwhile in the first place, right? So since we have you on, Dave, and this is the enviable position that Charlie and I have talking to smart people about this kind of stuff. I'll tell you, Charlie, honestly, the way I respond, this is just free form. You guys jump in, but the way I respond to your question about AI as a durable skill is it's not the AI, it's the design thinking. It's the critical thinking. It's the contextual orientation that we have. So like if I'm just going to produce slop, then I know how to use a chat bot and ask questions, right? But if I'm going to produce something that's genuinely valuable, I have to be dimensional myself in the first place. Now, feel free to say, Jeff, I think you're completely wrong. You don't need any of those in order to use AI. You can just put a question in and it gives you the answer. But I don't think that's what you think. So yeah, and Dave, you think about this a lot. You think about, okay, on the surface, the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is just the tip, right? There's the rest of this iceberg under the surface. So here's a skill, but what makes it durable? Well, that skill is atomic in some way. I think that's how you think, but correct me if I'm wrong, because if it's not atomic, like my hypothesis about AI, then there are several durable skills underneath that combine in order to create effective AI use. So I'm looking for you guys to say, Jeff, you're crazy, totally wrong. Or
I don't think you're crazy, Jeff. I just have one question for you. What are you smoking this morning? I'm
my
just
lungs
kidding.
can't handle the smoke. So I assure you, this is just me with curiosity, with a durable
Yeah.
skill.
No, I think we're in a place I haven't firmly come to a position on, and I think I like your framing of durable skills are a way you prove your AI literacy, not as opposed to AI literacy being its own durable skill. You bring your problem solving, you bring your critical thinking, you bring your empathy, and you get better at using this new tool. Right? It's a new tool. Is really at the end of the day. Maybe someday, if it gets significantly smarter than you won't have to be good at using it. You'll just have to let it know what you need, and it will know what to do.
Yeah,
that's not my experience today with it. Yeah.
But that's where I have to be honest with you. I see things a little bit differently from you both in that aspect, right? Because for me, I'm not the most articulate individual in the world. And at times I have difficulty kind of, talking out loud what I'm thinking, right? A lot of what's going on in here, by the time it comes out here, in my head, I'm like, WTF to myself. So I use AI in a way where I'm sort of feed it a bunch of mumbo jumbo stuff in my head, and it comes back at me. Not only it's able to organize and sequence, prioritize the bunch of mumbo jumbo in my head, but they also, if I give it instruction, it comes back with challenge, with sort of different challenges to my thinking, so to help me frame things better or to help me see things better. So it's not so much of just purely the design in my head and my own capability, but I see the AI is almost like the augmenter, the missing component that I have. So for example, I'm always been fascinated with coding, web development, but that's not what I have the competency or the knowledge. And so it's like, so here's what I think about it, and here's how I think I should work with it. And all of a sudden, AI comes back with like, well, that's good, and here's more and more. So I'm able to really think through and use the feedback to make my work a lot better. So to me, it's not just whatever's in here and I'm directing it, but I use it in a way that can make me smarter. before I even ask cowork to do any of the work, right? So I see a little bit differently, if that makes sense, Jeff and David.
It does, but Dave, let me ask you, how would you, like, Charlie gave a very eloquent description of his usage scenario that probably has a lot of cues for you about durable skills that Charlie has with great strength. So how would you parse it? Maybe that's a better way to
Yeah,
get
as
at
I
it.
was thinking, well, here's what I heard you say, Charlie. You have very clear ideas in your head that are very organized. When they come out of your mouth, they tend to get jumbled. And AI helps organize them into a way that you can then communicate to others what was in your head. I think you still need the durable skill of being able to analyze and evaluate what it put together and say, yeah, that's what was in my head. I think
That's right.
that one of the durable skills comes into play. And I agree with you, AI can add a lot of value in the piece it played, but you're still bringing your durable skill together to say, yeah, that is what I meant. That is the framing and the organization that I was looking for.
You
But
are strong
you
in
have to be
durable
able to
skills.
use the AI though, right? I mean, you still have to be able to use the AI in that way versus kind of wholesale adoption because we've seen that and we've seen it at work. And I think, from a school perspective, if you both two of my daughters are in college today, and the topic of AI is borderline like you shouldn't be using AI. Not so much in the employer's point of view or employment point of view, but more on cheating, using it to kind of a shortcut to really think and learn and fill in the gaps, etc. And I feel like that is the missing piece that perhaps how we use AI in the workplace, whether it's an individual durable skill with AI as an enabler or it's an AI as a durable skill or not. I think that is the piece how we see it in the employment space. I don't know if it translates into the higher ed, the learning space at the moment. Let me know if you disagree with that, David, and because you're a lot more closer to it than I am.
Yeah, I think there are very different things there happening. But I think the thing that I think about your example and the way you just followed it up, it takes me right back to the EDL framework. One thing that we haven't talked about at all about the free EDL framework and why we were very drawn to working with them specifically is it's very actionable. So they have a competency map, they have sub-competencies, and they have what they call criteria. And the criteria are all extremely actionable things. There are things like ask clarifying questions as part of an oral communication skill. And when I think about the critical thinking framework, the sub-competencies are things like gather and assess information, question assumptions, draw conclusions. Those are skills like in your example, you would be doing all of those things and when you were evaluating what the AI built based on your input. And to me, those are universal. They travel. If you teach those in school and I bring those to the job, I'm going to be much better at using AI in my job than if I don't have those skills because I don't have a framework. I don't know how to work with things. I don't know how to look at data critically and decide what to do with it, right? That's ultimately what it is. Like, what should I do with it? Should I give it to my boss because it's ready to go? Or should I go back to the AI because it's factually wrong? Or, I have to make those decisions. And I think what I like about EDL is it's a toolkit that gives you these techniques, which once you learn them, you can apply them in lots of different situations.
Wrap up on this episode, Dave. And I wish we had more time today, but I know I promised to
I
get you
agree.
in and out of here. I hope we can invite you back at some point because I think this AI conversation vis-a-vis durable skills and kind of you sitting in the catbird seat or Muzzy Lane sitting in the catbird seat, very interesting conversation, very timely. And I haven't heard this parse with as great a level of precision as I think you do and can. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know you.
Actually,
It was
David,
good.
one
Yes.
thing, if you can give our audience just a quick advice, because you sit in the middle of really important work between employer and higher ed and education on that durable skills component. Why would you recommend folks in higher ed right now to think about AI as a whatever, whether it's a durable skill or anything? Just a quick tip before we wrap this session up.
I think build AI into what you're doing. Like the ship has sailed. This is going to be part of our life going forward. I think. I mean, some people might say AI is still a fad that's going to crash. I don't think that's true. You've got to build it into what you're doing. You got to build it in how you're assessing. Otherwise, it's just going to be harder and harder to fight it, or you're going to, or people aren't going to value what you do. I guess that's the challenge.
A force of not nature, but like a force of nature, for sure. Well, thanks, Dave, and thank you to our audience for joining us today. And Dave, looking forward to talking with you next time.
Thanks. Great to see you both.
Thank you.